recording.
Hello, everyone. I think we're live. Let me confirm.
I see the
we
red
are.
light.
Yeah, we are live. Yep.
Yeah.
Let me turn down my volume.
Wait, I just heard you say that again.
It was my phone. Sorry, I'm professional. Making sure it was actually on. Hello, as everyone, people trickle in. Wait a little bit.
Hi, guys.
Alex, hi.
How can you see people? I can't see people. Oh, in the comments. I got it.
Oh, hi, Alex. I know I stole my dad's hat back. I gave this to him, but I had to steal it for the live stream to flex on these people.
It's iconic. I feel like it wouldn't fit my head, unfortunately. Hats rarely fit me. I have a pretty big head.
It's pretty small.
Okay, Alex, I'm really glad that you would also partake in a night with Felix. That makes me feel better because so many people replied to my story being like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So I'm glad you have a better taste in boys like me, Alex.
We love a project boyfriend.
Yeah. I could work on Felix and his warehouse hands.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get this thing going, right? We good? All right, sweet. So hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, and more specifically, welcome to the first episode of my new podcast on this channel. It is called Reading the Room, and every other week, I will have a guest or multiple guests to talk about something book-related. So for my first episode, I have two lovely guests, two of my favorite people ever, CJ and Hannah. Thank you so much for coming on this with me and talking about the iconic Sally Rooney. It seems like the proper first book to talk about for this podcast.
How could we not?
Introduce yourselves quickly, and then we can get into the book.
Okay, I'll go first.
Hannah, go first.
Hannah. From my channel is Hannah May. My Instagram is hannah.may. These are my lovely internet friends, and I'll tell you now, I'm a Sally Rooney stan. Like, loved her books from the start. So that's my bias I'm presenting to you tonight.
Great. I'm CJ. My channel is CJ Reads. I'm a Sally Rooney neutralist, so I don't really have a dog in this fight, but I do love a solid chance to critique anything. So I'm here as that point of view.
An agitator.
Just for any context, us three are internet friends. We talk constantly about books at large, so there is some developed rapport here. If you don't watch all three of us, we know each other. I'm just giving you that context.
Quite developed. I bother them all day. I butt dial Hannah in the middle of the night. It's a thing. So I'm sorry. All right. Well, let's get into it. I also am a Sally Rooney mega fan. I always attribute Normal People as like the book that really got me back into reading heavily. And then I went to a book club after reading it. And then I was like, I want to be more involved in the book community. And then I started doing Bookstagram and now BookTube. And so I went into this biased, I will admit, but this book I think is her best. I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I don't know. One thing about like all of the discourse around this is I often question my own opinion about the book, given, I don't know. I just wonder if I'm being too easy on it or something, but I really enjoyed it overall. So what did you guys think of it?
Yeah, I think I agree with your point about, I think, being so invested in the book community, the online community, I've been thinking about a lot more recently, and the bias that gives you to reading and sort of what that means to read a book after reading so much about reading. And I'm the same as you. I sort of thought, am I being too like easy on this? Did I really love it? And at the end of the day, for me, books are mostly an emotional relationship, and I had an emotional response to this book and I had a really good time reading it. So that's enough for me to say, like, I really enjoy it. I can critique the writing style, maybe some of the prose, but I really had a good time reading it. And I haven't read a book like in a couple of months where I've been like thinking about it while I put it down. Like, I was literally cooking dinner like, oh, I just want to pick it up again and again. And I feel like that's why I read. So I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a pretty neutral response to this book. I think out of the three of us, I enjoyed it the least, but I am kind of a notoriously persnickety reviewer star attributor to books. If I had to give it a star rating, it would be a 3 for me, and we can kind of unpack what that means. But that's my high level reception of this book. Was not a rave for me. I have critiques of it, but was not a total flop either. So yeah, and we have a little bit of a structure for this podcast. We're going to talk about the book, then the marketing behind it, then some of the discourse, and where we think Sally Rooney should go from here. So there will be a little bit of agenda. Wondering if we want to get into any specifics of more about the book, though, and the writing and this novel at large.
Well, I think the major thing that I was struck by when I picked this up is the epistolary nature of the book, in terms of every other chapter being an email between two friends, two women. And what did you think of that structure? Did you like it? Did you not? For me, the emails were my favorite part of this book. Honestly, like the plot, looking back on it, the plot didn't really... I feel like most of my enjoyment was through getting Sally Rooney's insights on the novel, on beauty, on religion, and like getting into her mind for what felt like the first time in terms of really seeing her explore these topics very directly and in response to her success. And so that was my favorite part. And I was so happy she did it that way. But I've seen some mixed responses to it. So what did you both think?
I think it was interesting, the inclusion of the email structure as a way to bring in more of like the fabricated personas that friendships can take on in more internet-driven spaces. And I think in comparison to the more like dry, removed writing of the non-email segments, it allowed some emotion and more interiority of the characters' minds to form without her breaking that epistolary. How do you say that word? Epistolary?
Epistolary, I think. I don't
epistolary,
know.
Epistolary structure.
Letters, basically, yeah.
I liked it, and I liked that it was acknowledging the construct of the construct. It was meta.
Very.
Yeah, I think that I found it jarring to start with the different tone from the very detached, like super observant third person we're getting. But I think pairing that with the email structure, I quite liked how you got this almost like reverse view of the events that were happening. So you saw them at a distance, and then you saw the interior mind of the person who was part of the event. And I think particularly when it came to the personal relationships, the romantic relationships, I found that really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you think in terms of, I'm just kind of responding, I'm kind of getting into the discourse already around the book, but in terms of, I've seen some critiques of like, maybe Sally Rooney should have just written an essay collection, or like, putting herself in the narrative so clearly, did that work for you? Or do you think that's a bad criticism? I kind of think it's bad criticism. I like that it's kind of auto-fictional in a way. And that's something that you and I, or all three of us, talk about all the time, is autofiction and what the role is in contemporary literature and whether it works or when it doesn't. And I thought it was brilliant, but that's me.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, she is an elusive writer, right? She doesn't give a ton of interviews. She doesn't have a social media presence as a person. I think that's obviously personal choice, but I think we will never know how much of this is auto-fictitious unless she comes out and tells us. I think we can make all these conclusions and assume that she is the embodiment of Alice and Alice is her, and these conversations are obviously like a celebrity novelist appearing in a book by a celebrity novelist. You're going to make some connections with the parallels there, but I don't think I hated it, and I think in some respects she's very much staying in her lane and writing what she knows, because she's telling from experience of this like phenomena that her book has sort of run away without her, like without any of her control behind why normal people blew up to the way that it did. As Alice says in the book, like she just wrote a book, and I think that's really interesting to consider why that's not on her as a writer to assume why normal people became this like worldwide success that it did when she didn't set out to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a larger conversation of separating art from the artist, and we could nitpick that and deep dive on that all day, but I think it was an interesting way for her to unpack this like ingenue persona that she has had to battle against for better or for worse. Like it's gotten her notoriety and fame and given her a comfortable life. But I think the persona of the ingenue and her realizing that that's tied to femininity and being a young woman and that's going to expire. I really liked the exploration of that more auto-fictitious parallels between Eileen's character or is it Alice's character and Rooney herself. And I think it also puts some nuance back onto the reader and makes them have to discern and decipher like what parts of the characters are fabricated and drawn from real life, just like any other book. You know what I mean? Like it's putting ownership back onto it. So it's a symbiotic relationship a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is I feel like that's part of what she wants to do and maybe is trying to do, even in maybe response to the normal people notoriety that she gained, was kind of saying like, these are my cards, this is where I sit with this whole situation, without coming out and doing a New York Times piece on it herself under her name. So I think that was, maybe an interesting way to play her cards, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was smart and will get her less criticism than if she did publish an essay collection about an recount of her experiencing fame. Like this is less whiny than that would ever be.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think the reception of fabricating this novelist character is kind of a cop-out, but it's smart on her part to
it gives that degree of separation between, because I don't know, like sometimes I always think like you can have different opinions, like the author is dead and all these ideas about like the book is the book without the author, but like I do sometimes think when books get this level of critique and conversation around them, like that is just one person who wrote one book and like they have to receive and take this all on. So I can see why she didn't choose to publish the essay collection, and we probably would have critiqued it more if she did. So you kind of can't win.
Definitely. I said this in my reading blog for the book, and I'll just say it again, but this book in a way reminded me of Taylor Swift's Blank Space in terms of like Taylor Swift, trying to portray the caricature of what the media perceived her as. And I think this book is successful. It would have been less successful if Rooney wrote another just kind of like lovey-dovey story in the way of like normal people or conversations with friends. I think the epistolary emails really lend it a level of depth that would have made this book just very flat for me without it. So yeah, it was an interesting response that I've seen to that. And I have questions about what she might do next, but I'll save that for the end of the chat. But so about like the actual plot of this book, what did you think of the relationships and another square situation, kind of like her first book? Did it work for you? Did it not?
Yeah, I think, like you said, the plot is secondary to my enjoyment of the book. I think I just am there for her writing and her, like I've spoken to you guys about this before, but like as a UK reader, like I'm very there for her representation of contemporary Ireland. I feel like that's something that's often overlooked with a book that becomes like internationally famous, like Anglo-American famous. I feel like she's saying some really interesting things as an Irish writer, as a like quite a complicated history of a country that is commented on in nuances that are often missed. And I feel like for me that really shone through here like it did in Normal People, but with a slightly older age range of characters. Therefore their conversations they were having about Ireland were slightly more developed, and I thought that was really interesting, particularly around like religion and Catholicism. But yeah, I would say the plot is secondary to me.
Oh, how do I feel about the plot and these characters? I think that is the blanket critique of Rooney, is that she's fixated on writing about these problematic, flawed characters, and it's kind of her trope she goes back to again and again, right? That is the critique of where her writing has its fault, is that it's repetitive and she's doing it again. And some of that is true, and I would say the unbelievability of these four characters repetitively experiencing this miscommunication so many times at this age in their lives and at this point in their lives was probably the main reason this was a 3-star book for me instead of a 4-star. I think that plot device hindered some of the bigger meta themes that she included in this book in a negative way. We were just talking about this in our group chat a little bit earlier about why I didn't like this book, and I like other narratives that are pretty similar in themes. And I think if I could pinpoint it, that's it. It's the unbelievability of repetition of the same mistakes over and over again at this age, is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I totally see where you're coming from. And I try to, so there's this piece that came out, I forget where or who the author was, I apologize, but the title was Sally Rooney is Irish, was the title of the essay.
Well, yeah, that's the Gawker piece.
Oh, is that Gawker? Okay.
Yeah,
yeah. So I tried to think about, because I had similar frustrations, and that's happened with every time that I read a Rooney novel, is like, why don't they just like talk? You know what I mean? But I think maybe, I don't know, I feel like I'm maybe missing some nuance there about kind of the cultural reasons behind the way that they communicate the way that they do. Or it also, I think as a piece of fiction, it helps lend some conflict to it. And maybe that's why romance sometimes doesn't work for me for similar reasons. I don't know, just general idea that I had.
Yeah, I think you're right about the specific miscommunications and the way that she deals with this like distancing, this toing and froing between the characters feels to me like, as someone with Irish family, like something that is part of their cultural fabric, to have this sort of like swept under the rug conversation of things that just keep going. And I feel like Felix, when you go to the party with Felix and his sort of like friends and family, and they're all outside and he meets his brother for the first time, I thought that was really indicative of those sort of conversations around Irishness and that idea of like small towns, particularly like rural towns, small life, people knowing everyone's business but not really saying what they mean. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I guess I just like, that's probably part of the cultural nuance and context that I'm missing. If young Irish people really is that much of a homogenous entity with the way they communicate with each other. But like 4 characters being that flat and having that much of the same emotional nuance and reactionness was unbelievable to me. But maybe that truly is so ingrained in Irish culture that the inability to communicate is real across that many people. But I just felt like, I'm like, really? Like all of them are having this relationship with one another that can't have any like flex? Like it's happening again across all 4 of them?
Yeah, I don't know if do you mean again as in like across all of her books?
Yeah, across all of her books and repetitively across these 4 characters over and over again.
Yeah, because I don't know about all of those books, because I don't consider them, like maybe that's a trope that she inherits in her characters, but I don't necessarily think that it's, you would consider all of her characters of the last 3 books being in the same space at the same time.
Well, okay, let's take this book for example. We have Eileen, a white woman. We have 4 characters. One is bisexual, queer of some nature. One comes from a more repressed religious background. One is more working class. Like, I think there is differentiation between the 4 of them enough that they would communicate differently.
Yeah, right.
Or have more tools than one another. Like, they're not really that all streamlined that their emotional IQ would be completely flattened to the same. And that's what I found frustrating, I guess.
I will say, I think one counterpoint to that I liked, that I thought was kind of funny, was how she uses then the emails in which Alice and Eileen, at least the two women, speak to each other very openly about what they're feeling, like what they're not saying to their partners. And I thought that was an interesting way of exploring how friendship differentiates itself from sexual relationships in this novel. And I think that kind of I think I like the letters the most because it kind of gets around the issues of miscommunication in the main plot, in terms of just seeing two women really talking to each other about their feelings and about bigger themes such as beauty, religion, the novel itself. And so I think maybe that's why that worked for me. Now I'm just coming to that realization now, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to read the chat at the same time.
I know it's
getting
hard.
muddled.
I'm trying to keep
I think, yeah,
There's
like what you said
so many
about,
smart comments coming in.
I know.
yeah, and I'm like getting distracted thinking about them. But yeah, lots of people saying that like that does feel like a thing that is common in young, like obviously you can't homogenize an entire group, but with young people, and then particularly I think you see it in Simon with his like I think the whole response to religion is really interesting in this book, and I think about the way that Simon is shunned and mocked for his choice to be a Christian in contemporary Ireland, I think is super interesting, and I think that also contributes to the conversation about miscommunication, because it is such a specific context of the country where church and state have been tied together for so long, and they are so behind in so many things that are taken for granted in lots of other Western countries, that I think Simon represents this character of like just like quite a moral conundrum of knowing that he was raised religious and wants to continue that, and doesn't it's not the same kind of Irish religion that he was raised in. They talk about like sinners and hell and these kind of ideas, and he wants to say like I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting, the conversation about how he's mocked in an extremely Irish way for choosing to be religious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think it also
that was really funny from Ryan. I got hung up on the details she put into people describing how they use their phones. I've seen this critique a lot. People getting really frustrated that she doesn't name the apps. I don't know. I only noticed it because I read the critique before I read the book. I don't know if it bugs anyone else. Like she talks about a taxi app instead of Uber.
I think that's to further drive her deadpan descriptiveness home rather than like the interiority of the characters. Because if she wasn't doing that, we'd be like, oh, Alice was like feeling gloomy when she was waiting for her Uber. You know what I mean? Like it's a further removal of inside their minds, except in the email portions we get, which I think was smart. I liked that.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's a distinctive choice she's making. Someone made it out like someone's critique was that it made it look like she never used social media, which is obviously unbelievable. Like, of course, she knows what Uber is. She could have named Uber if she wanted to. But I agree, it was like that very deadpan, like observant but distant sort of frame that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, Kieran, that's really interesting.
Oh, what did he mention? Let's see.
Sorry, carry on. I was just...
No, you're good.
Yeah, I think it's something about it being a millennial novel and a book that isn't specifically about a political foreground that makes people critique that less than they do observe its Irishness. And someone said it seems like a middle-class sense of communication. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think it's an Irish sense of communication.
I feel like before we move on to the marketing machine behind this book, I think another big thematic tie-in was like battling existential dread, acknowledging your place as the world burns around you, beautiful world, where are you? And the sense of like privilege these characters inhabit while the world is crumbling below them. I wonder if we can like unpack that a little bit more, because that's huge and could go a lot of places and would be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was my key takeaway of this novel. And when I read it, I had a very emotional response to it, just because in a lot of contemporary fiction, these are issues that many authors are addressing right now in terms of most notably climate anxiety, and figuring out like what is the purpose of living if it's going to all crumble very soon. Like, what do I do as a single person to help that, or can I help it, or am I being selfish if I don't, or am I just being a human if I don't? And I love those questions that she raises here. I think it's an interesting examination because I think that Rooney poses a lot more questions than answers. And I like when in my fiction, I like seeing a writer battle with themselves on the page. And it seems through the letters, most notably, that she's really trying to examine these and more specifically look at it through the lens of a novel and figure out, like, can a novel provide any attempt at a solution to these issues, or is a novel more so fundamentally rooted in relationships and humanity? And is that okay for it to do that? I have no clear way to like draw that together, but I just loved parsing through it. And it helped me think more critically about some recent books that I've read that are kind of similar in tone, and kind of thinking about them more generally as well. But
yeah, I think I agree that I enjoy the fiction that poses its questions and doesn't present either character nor author as the all-seeing, all-knowing person to provide those answers. I don't believe that's the role of art or the author or the artist to do those things. I think they're merely there to open the conversational like sphere up to people to consider those things. Of course, the characters she writes about, I mean, bar Felix, are pretty privileged or access middle class ways of life in the book, but I think that I've lost my train of thought. I need to stop looking at the chat. It's really
I know.
But I enjoy, and I think if you haven't, I'm sure lots of people on here have read Brandon Taylor's response review critique of it, and I think he comments on this trend of asking questions without answers and what that actually means for book.
Yeah, it just seems the sense of urgency around where we're at in the timeline of humanity. Every choice you make can feel really nihilistic if you let it. You know what I mean? And I think she leaned into that the right amount. But I can also see this kind of novel quickly coming to an end if the world burns as I predict it to.
Okay.
Like, I can just see the critique of white woman combating existential dread and like thinking through nihilistic thoughts and having no sense of urgency or action, because that's like the narrative that I feel this book is pushing a little bit. It's like the only interactions that matter are like the familial and the day-to-day, and you know, your intimate relationships, caretaking them is important because some things are out of our control. And while I do agree with that, and I'm not actively out with the Sunrise Movement right now picketing pipeline expansions, you know what I mean? I think that's a dangerous catwalk that she's doing there. And I hope that that doesn't persuade her huge audience of thinking that they can opt out of demonstrating or participating in something that's larger than the intimate and the one-on-one. Because I feel like it got there a little bit in the end, where it was kind of like, hands up, like it's out of my control. And I think that's just like an ugly take to have in 2021, even if it is true. You know what I mean? Even if it is true and relatable, which it absolutely is for me. Again, I'm talking on my silly little computer at my job. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not out in the streets rioting right now. I just think it's dangerous. I think it's a dangerous narrative to put out to a bunch of kids, because kids are reading this.
It's true.
I don't know if it's I don't know. Like I know what you mean, and I agree. It's very you know, like white woman in her nest, like preaching to the masses kind of scenario. And I think it's hard to reconcile how she became so big and sort of how that aligns with her personal politics. And as we've said before, she's a person who doesn't speak freely about those kind of things. So I don't know where she puts her money or what she does privately or what she does in her community, or any of those things, to say whether or not I could place a judgment on what she is contributing. And I think in the same way that is dangerous, it is also dangerous to, I guess, like put a morality sort of like on these characters to say that they should be doing more, because I don't know if that's necessarily what someone said. Where are the someone said where are the generous donations? Well, we don't know. Like, you can't comment on someone's private finances without knowing. Like, people don't need to laud where they put their money.
Well, I think this kind of careens us really conveniently into novelist as celebrity and the marketing force that's behind this book. Mm-hmm. And this kind of separation that we have a culture because of intellectualism, because of morality of like books and literature and the novel have protected books around. I think we are almost at a point in a culture where novelists, especially ones that are as pervasive and huge as Sally Rooney, are going to be subjected to that kind of critical inquiry. Like, what is different about the Beehive holding Beyonce accountable to her affiliations with corporations and where she spends her money than fans of this book? You know, like the separation between book as object that is a part of capitalism and can be consumed versus other forms of media and art is disappearing even more so now. And I think that's important to acknowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. And that's why I think people have had such a visceral reaction to this marketing campaign, is because they view books as this morally superior object, if not just a tool to perpetuate late capitalism. At the end of the day, this is just something to be bought and sold, which is exactly what we're all doing as book lovers and booksellers. And whatever you do, like, we all participate in this. And I think, like, to me, the ad campaign maybe seemed extreme, but if you look at what they do for lipstick or trainers or whatever else in any other industry, people do not bat an eyelid when thousands of pounds worth of free product are sent to influencers. It's something about this being a book that people seem to have such an ick reaction to the marketing campaign for.
Well, one thing that I have a hard time thinking through on this topic specifically is how much of the book in its text is addressing these issues. However, then the publisher goes on to sell it in this huge way, and it's so directly contrary to many of the beliefs that she espouses in this text. And I'm wondering what the nuance is there between examining the ideas that she has here, but also selling the book, and where Sally Rooney falls in that, and whether there's any kind of distance to be found there between, because she addresses some of this in the book in terms of her questioning why she has to be the face and the entity behind the book. Like, what does that play into her responsibility for how the book is sold, or is not, I guess. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on where Rooney maybe herself falls into this or not.
Yeah, that's what I would also like to ask her. Like, I particularly think there's been the way it's been marketed worldwide, I think, has been really interesting. And I agree with Kieran, who you can put on the screen, says she's not the marketing campaign, and I feel she has no say. And I would agree that I think she has little say, if not
I absolutely disagree with that. I bet she has more agency and control over this than we think, especially with the capital, social, and financial that she's gained throughout her career thus far. Like, that's almost naive for me to think that she has no participation in how her own work is marketed, especially in 2021.
I agree. And I will say one thing about this is, one, she did publish a new novel and accepted whatever advance she received for it. It's one part, but also, to me, a lot of this book did feel like she was writing in preparation for a future TV or movie adaptation. I feel like a lot of this book feels, in the plot sections, I guess, feels like it's written as a screenplay, and she has, all of her books so far have been adapted. And I think, I agree with you, CJ. I think there is, I'm sure there's a lot that she doesn't touch, but I do think she's complicit in it, and her position as a Marxist and publishing a Marxist novel, whatever that means. It's weird. It would be different if this book was just like, I don't know, I'm just throwing out like a fantasy novel or like, the new Harry Potter or something where it's just where it doesn't contravene the ideas in the book so much. And it's just weird to me. It's just so odd. I don't know what the answers are, but yeah.
This is such a small case study example of authors having agency over how their book is publicized. But Lauren Euler, who wrote Fake Accounts, tweeted that her team pitched that a tote bag be put out and she said no, and it didn't go further. And like Lauren Euler was a first-time author. Like maybe there is a relationship between marketing heads and the producer of the art that exists. And I know that from firsthand experience, like working in the marketing and advertising agency. Like some of it is out of their control, but there's more authorship than you would think.
Yeah, that's interesting what Kieran said. And it had me thinking to the launch of this, the last thing I saw this big was probably Margaret Atwood's The Testaments, which I don't know how it was in the US, but like it went crazy in the UK. It had the early openings, it had all this stuff. And I think especially when we talk about the embargo, and Atwood's like a, lifelong writer. And I don't think we could say either way, to be honest, on who said what, who your agent is, who your publicity is. I think like just from my experience of just like writing for newspapers, like you don't get a say in so much. Like you don't choose the headline, you don't choose the pictures. They'll edit you to fuck until they get what they want. And I don't know. I agree she has agency because she has a lot of money. Clearly she could say no to things, but I don't know if everything passes by her to the point where she personally writes it all off.
Yeah, I just don't think we can say that she's just a writer anymore. Like, I don't know. I think that's an important distinction now. Like her not wanting to form parasocial relationships with her audience is valid, but I think it's not real. Like she's a writer, and she also has a space of celebrity, which not all writers do.
Oh, like, yeah, definitely a celebrity novelist, but like I would say one that's not, I guess, responsive to the status.
Mm-hmm.
An absent celebrity novelist, that you could say.
I mean, so what do you think about Alice's take in the book about how she's just, writing her little novels and just, it blew up, but like she didn't have really much control over that. And this comment it mentioned that at her recent lecture, she's very contemplative of her position. And I think this novel is her exploring all these issues that we're questioning her with her not being here about. And I think it would have been, I don't know if irresponsible is the right word. It would have felt off if she did not address something about these issues in terms of her publishing novels in this book. If she had just written another normal people style book, I think she would get a million more critiques than she's already receiving of the book. If it was just the non-letter parts, I guess. I don't know if you agree with that, but
I agree.
I at least give her credit for tackling the issue. And I don't know what her responsibility is beyond that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know what how you respond to this level of perception of your work. Like I don't think maybe like when she wrote Conversations with Friends, I don't think that was like it was normal people that blew her up and that led arguably to this marketing campaign to be like this. And I think that was through the TV adaptation that gained those extra rounds of followers. Even in my personal life, like my friends didn't know who Sally Rooney was until they watched the TV show and fell in love with fucking Connell's chain. Like it reached this huge wide audience. And I think that that's saying a lot about, like you say, about the screenplay. And I think that's a wider conversation to be had about authors now writing for TV, because that's where the money is, and the idea of how books function as that object of media. But yeah, I don't know. What do we know? This is the conclusion.
I think Alex brings a good point, whether she'll ever write another novel. This is another, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it kind of gets into the discourse in terms of some critiques that I've seen in terms of, I've seen some reviewers say that this book feels like her least successful because it feels like she's kind of all over the place in terms of trying to figure out like what she wants to write about, or her not nailing down her ideas. Again, like I said before, that worked for me immensely. It would have felt a little bit disingenuous if she tried to like, I don't know, come to some strong conclusions about these issues. And so I do wonder what she will do next, and how the reception of this book and the marketing behind it will play into whatever she does next. I'm not really sure what ground she has to cover in this kind of millennial into 30s, falling in love, in and out of love, what more ground she has now that she's addressed these issues, even though they're still persisting in terms of her selling this huge book again. And a lot of the discourses, a lot of things she talks about in the book, it seems like it's going to be cyclical. So I wonder how or if she will get around that.
Yeah, I don't know where she'll go from here. Someone, I think Steffi said that she signed a 2-book deal with FSG, so there will be another book. But I can imagine her going into hiding at least for 5 years by now, being like wanting to become more elusive, wanting to become more detached from this response, because it's just sort of like not what she signed up for, I guess. Like when she said, as Alice says, like she just wanted to write her silly little book. CJ?
What are you thinking, CJ?
Like, what a convenient stand once you do your cash grab and you're like sitting, chilling. Like, she didn't have to write this next book. I don't know. I think that's a little icky for me.
Yeah. Alex says like Donna Tartt, which is true. I feel like that wouldn't be the first author to do that.
Yeah. It's like, girl, go be Elena Ferrante if you want to be elusive and off the grid. Like that, I think that's our only modern comparison of like an author really rejecting celebrity, right? Like,
yeah.
so
but
much
that has the benefit of time, because that was before, really, like she was writing in Italy way before social media, way before like you could have this level of parasocial relationship. She got there first. I don't think a current millennial author could do that, even if they wanted to.
Yeah, I wonder how much agency they have in those kind of decisions. And that's something that I think about a lot recently, like over the course of the pandemic, in terms of authors giving so many like Zoom events with other authors, and just really being a public presence for their novel and really explaining it to an audience. What that does, this is kind of a tangent, but what that does to the novel in terms of the author being so prevalent in terms of trying to sell the book to people. I think, so I don't know if Rooney's a little bit of a different case here, because this book is going to sell no matter what. And so it's a little bit different, but I wonder how the public persona of an author plays into our perception of novels today.
I mean, it ties back into that earlier conversation we were having about like books being exempt from media because of this like faux intellectualism or like aesthetic of what being a reader is and what literature does, like that we have put onto books. But like, I think she's acknowledging that's not the place of the modern novel anymore, and like it shouldn't be. So, I don't know. It's just like that is inherent to what being an author is now. And I think the resistance to forming those parasocial relationships and like any judgment that naturally happens, because the construct we do to have form those relationships are one of celebrity and audience interaction, is like a little judgmental to me. And I don't like it. I don't like it.
I can't think of a lot. I'm trying to think of authors that I personally admire that have a very hyper-present social media, and I can't, besides Brandon Taylor on Twitter, like I can't think of many. Like Zadie Smith has opted out of social media since like 2000, and like loads of, I don't know, I like Jenny Offal doesn't, like, I don't know, I don't feel like it's that common to have hyper-present literary fiction writers. Maybe
I feel like that's not necessarily true. Like Lauren Groff, Lauren Euler, Brandon Taylor, Leah Dietrich. Like I don't know, if I think I've sought out like a lot of those authors online just to like get more into their brain space, and I found them. But I can see that going either way. Yeah.
Really good comments. Sorry, I'm like behind on them. Let's see. Oh my
God. Kieran, I don't know.
We did, Alex.
Yeah, I'm with Kieran on that point on Marxism. I also think people have really taken and run with that as her entire personal identity, which I don't think she ever claimed. I mean, maybe there is a full interview where she went off on Marxism I haven't seen, but.
Yeah, that's a really good summation of that.
And I think constantly asking why she's got so rich or so much money, like, I don't think that's productive because, one, we don't know where she spends her money, and B, that's applicable to pretty much anyone with success, whether that's footballers or Beyonce or Lorde or any of those people. The same critique can be leveled at all of them, I guess.
And one thing that we mentioned in the group chat earlier, is going a little bit more to the discourse again, is I feel like some of the coverage, at least, of this book feels a little bit misogynistic on that front. And I think it's something to be discussed. I don't have any strong thoughts to say right now other than that I get that ick feeling in some of the coverage. It's been a lot, of course, but.
Yeah, I agree. I have had my fair share of comments, like on my own personal social media when I've spoken about liking Sally Rooney, of people referring to her as like a woman's writer, or like she writes chick lit, and these sort of like, I mean, completely dead in the water subgenres that are misogynistic in their take anyway, just because she wants to write about young people and love. I find that all very tired, but I agree a lot of the undertones, particularly that you read from male critics, tend to have that tone of a silly little woman writing a silly little book, which, as she claims, is her own stance that she's prepared to admit is what she does. I don't think she's claiming to write anything else. Sorry, I just need my charger.
Are there any other like contemporary litfic male authors who are talking about Marxism?
Any male? Sorry, did you say? I don't read a lot of men. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean,
I know we're like, not the crew to ask. But I was just like further honing in that point of what she's up against from a criticism standpoint, and I'm wondering if that would be thrown at a male too.
I agree, exactly. And I also think just this whole idea of her being the millennial voice and like carrying this huge fucking plaque with her everywhere she goes, when in fact she's not the only one, and also no one ever said she was the only one. Like, there's plenty of books to go around for everyone to read, and I think that when I read these like very critical reviews of her, it often seems like people are, I don't know, they're the ones putting her up on this huge pedestal of saying she said she was Marxist and then she did this, and she said she was writing the millennial novel, but they can't talk to each other. And it's sort of like, it's not the only book. And it's not the only voice. And I think that's the fault of the reviewers and the critics who keep calling it the voice. There isn't a voice.
I like that.
Yeah. So where do you both think that this book, how will this be looked at like 5 years from now, say? Do you think it will hold up?
I'm sick of that argument. Sorry.
No, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm wondering.
He's the devil.
I'm so sick of this question of timelessness. I was like thinking about it in a wrap-up I did the other day. Like, why are we so hypercritical of books set in the hyper now, but no one wants to talk about when Jane Austen was published or when these classics books, why do they become timeless? And books that have social media become tired so quickly. Why? Because we're living in social media right now. Like, I don't get it. Please help me.
Yeah, time is literally fake, guys. Like, who cares?
It is fake.
So what do we want from the future of litfic? Like, I mean, where do we go from here as readers? Where do we go from here as this like millennial genre? Who do we want Sally Rooney to become? Is that right for us to want her to become anything at all? How do we wrap up our last 11 minutes of this chat?
One of my intentions I set for this year was to stop caring about authors and start caring about stories. And I clearly haven't done very well as that, as I'm here to talk about being a Sally Rooney stan. But I feel like it would help me just personally divorcing myself from the hopes of authors, as we've seen so many authors recently and will continue to do so come out with these abhorrent views, that I don't know if it's helpful to consider or to be personally invested, I guess, in her writing career.
because you've been burned from like the failings of other authors that you've had that attachment to who have turned out to be abhorrent human beings and it ruined their writing for you, right?
Right, exactly. And also not even necessarily that that it's just that they're just people like you and me. And I think there's this real idea of the author being this huge, like elusive, like stature that none of us mere readers could ever acclaim to, when like I'm trying to write a book. I know loads of people trying to write a book. Maybe one day I'll be an author, and I would hate for people to think that that makes you this other entity. Like I feel like when people talk about the death of the author, that's actually what I mean, is like death of this idea of the author being better than the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you brought this up earlier too, in terms of going back to Brandon Taylor's piece on this, in terms of a lot of these DWM, thinky novels about women's place, specifically women's place in the world, and what can we do about it. I mean, I don't know what the response. I don't know what the answer is there, and I do think that these style of novels, if we keep getting them at this pace that we are, I think, and I feel like, the book hotties read all of them. And I just wonder how we'll think about it if we keep reading the same story. Or like what is the new take that could be had on this subgenre?
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally feeling a little burnt out on confirming my bias over and over again. That like, yes, I am a privileged white woman in the world who is depressed and who hates late stage capitalism. So I think like, hopefully on a very personal level, I'll continue to seek out stories that don't completely confirm my bias all the time, because that's what helps us think and grow and evolve as humans. And I hope that trickles into what publishing houses pick up, the authors that they represent, more marginalized voices being represented at large. But it is interesting to note the burnout internally and start to notice how that affects my reading, because I think it'll affect her viewership or her readership as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what Alex said there about like, I'm intrigued about what the next Rooney phenomenon will be and what that will mean, I guess, to the generation below us or the generation below them. And sort of, I guess, millennial fiction is in itself a genre, like YA is a genre, like it is talking to a specific audience about a specific period in time. And maybe that's why people have these views where they think, these people can't communicate. And then half the people in the comments are saying, oh, but I can't communicate either. And the rest of you are saying, oh my God, I can communicate. What's wrong with all of you? And it's sort of, I guess, back to that thing of reading is subjective, and also like she's writing for an audience, like not for a universal sort of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you, CJ, probably are the queen of reading the most DWM, so I can appreciate your burnout. I feel lucky that I only read the cream of the crop that you suggest to me. So, but like, yeah, mixing up your reading and what you take on will be is always useful to get a different perspective. I'm not going to suddenly start reading sci-fi, I don't think, but yeah, I think exploring other things and other representations, like when you read The Employees, Jalen, that's talking about these similar themes in such a different way. And there are other ways to talk about these things that don't have to be about privileged white women.
Absolutely.
And I think like Kieran's thought of us reading with no context, like context of, I don't know if the right word I'm looking for is context, but with, what did he say? Do you guys remember?
What, like predispositions?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like reading books without a lot of backing and publicity and like readership behind them already, and just being more exploratory and experimental. I think that is important as books become more of a commodity and like a currency.
Yeah, definitely. And Karen says, do you think as reviewers you should read outside your bias? And I don't think any of us consider ourselves by any means professional reviewers. Like, this is our hobby, this is for fun. I'm not going to read things that I think are awful just for the sake of reviewing them for other people, because to be honest, I read for myself, number one. And so I'm going to read things I enjoy. I don't think I have any responsibility to read anything other than what I enjoy personally, except obviously reading stories that are as diverse and fulfilling as society and the world around me. But I don't know. I'm still pondering on why it is that Sally Rooney has become so divisive in her take on millennial life that relates to some people and not relates to other people.
Mm-hmm.
I also think a lot of the response to her books, I feel like a lot of, in terms of kind of like book reviewing, a lot of people want to have like a hot take on the hottest thing.
Yeah.
And so it's always, that's another thing about this book that I try to think through is how much of the response is people trying to pry at it, and I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really important also to remember the specificity of our context as people who spend time on bookish social media, which is not the large readership. I always think about my mum when I read Sally Rooney, because she reads Sally Rooney and has absolutely no idea of the discourse that goes on, doesn't know about the marketing campaign, just picks up the books because she's been a fan of her writing since her debut. And that is the majority of readership. The majority of readers go into a bookshop and pick up a book and buy a book, and that's it. Like, there isn't this whole singing and dancing reviewing about books all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So true, bestie.
Yeah, can you put up MJ's point? I agree.
Yes. I have to scroll, sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
There we go. No, you're good.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I definitely read outside of my bias, and as if anyone watches me and my friends know, like, I read pretty much 50-50 fiction, non-fiction, and most of my non-fiction reading is reading outside of my own experiences. That's how I like to consume that kind of learning. But I think everyone's like reading choices are personal. I don't think what I meant was reviewing online makes really no difference to what I choose to read, except the influence of like these two lovely people and a few friends who I really trust on the internet. I'm not one to, I guess, pander to the hype. Like, if I didn't like Sally Rooney, I just wouldn't read this book.
Right.
Any final thoughts?
I know, coming up on the 1 hour mark. Any final points?
Anything we didn't cover that the viewership would like us to chat through quickly? The viewership.
While we wait for any last questions, thank you everyone for tuning in. We've had like a solid like 60 people in here this entire time, which is wild to me. So thank you for taking your lunch or dinner hour or other time to hang out with us.
My bedtime.
Oh, I know.
What's for tea, lads?
What is
for tea?
We had risotto.
Okay.
How does this compare? Oh, quick, Adam, you're asking the important questions in the last 3 minutes.
How does this compare to? Oh,
dude.
Oh, all right. I'll go first. This is my favorite of her novels. Given just the meta narration, autofictional elements of it, something I've been vibing with heavily in my reading journey. So I say this is my favorite. Second favorite would be Normal People. Least favorite, Conversations.
I think Normal People is probably still my favorite. Just like was one of those like time and place books that like I read it at the right time. I read it in 24 hours. Like read it when I was really depressed. And then this would be second. But I do also really like Conversations with Friends. I know people tend to want you to pick a camp, but I like them all for different reasons.
Yeah, I think my favorite is Conversations with Friends.
Wow.
And then Beautiful World, Where Are You? And then Normal People. I know I'm crazy like that.
I didn't expect that for some reason.
No, CJ's so Conversations with Friends. I can see it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like the female friendship, the exploration of queerness.
Yeah, it's had a lot of queer
messiness being warranted because they're young.
That's a good question.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Connie's train.
I'm probably still gonna say Felix. I'm sorry.
I'm stuck between Connell and Felix.
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't know.
Not Marianne.
Not
Marianne. Maybe Alice.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Alice is like my detached bae. We could date.
Yeah, I agree. I really, people are slating Alice, but like, props to Alice, I think. I would date Alice or Felix probably, or both.
Not Simon.
Yeah.
Felix, what's the attraction? had this conversation with a lot of people in my DMs when I put on my Instagram that I would sleep with Felix. Jaden, tell everyone what the attraction is with this horrible man.
We love a project boyfriend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's what we can make.
Yeah. We can craft him.
Oh my gosh.
And his unloving ways. Yeah, Alex has the final point. We'll date them all on rotation and then rate them for a YouTube video.
Absolutely.
And a Vice article.
Well, I guess that about does it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you both for helping me with my first episode on this podcast. It was lovely. Love speaking with you both. I think the next one will be in 2 weeks. I don't know who will be joining me, but it's happening. So, yeah. Should we
Say goodbye.
can we do a picture with our...
You want a thumbnail?
Ready?
He wants the thumbnail.
Bye, besties.
Hold on.
Oh, wait. Hold on.
I can do it.
Bye. Love you
All
guys.
right. Bye, everyone.